He sold over 750 million records. He invented dance moves that are still being imitated 50 years later. He was the most famous person on the planet for 3 decades. And he died alone in a rented mansion, being kept alive by a personal doctor injecting him with surgical anesthetic so he could sleep. The story of Michael Jackson is not one story. It's several, and almost none of them are what you think. We're covering his extraordinary childhood, the making of the greatest pop album ever recorded, the moment everything started to unravel, the accusations that split the world in two, the financial ruin nobody saw coming, and the death that shocked a planet. This is the full story. Stay with me. Michael Jackson was not discovered. He was built by a driven father, a relentless rehearsal schedule, and a childhood he would spend the rest of his life mourning. Gary, Indiana in the 1960s was a tough, working-class steel town. Joseph Jackson worked at the steel mill by day and played guitar in a band by night. He saw something in his sons. Raw talent, unusual talent, and he pushed it with everything he had. Michael was the 7th of 9 children. By the time he was 5, he was performing. By the time he was 8, he was the lead singer of the Jackson 5. Joseph's rehearsals were legendary for their intensity. Former members of the family have described beatings when the stakes were made, hours of practice that left no room for school friends, birthday parties, or a normal childhood. The Jackson 5 signed with Motown in 1969. Michael was 11 years old. Their first 4 singles all went to #1. By the time Michael was 13, he had performed in front of millions of people, recorded multiple albums, and toured America and the world. What he hadn't done was go to school, make friends his own age, have a birthday party, or live anything resembling a normal childhood. In later interviews, Michael would describe growing up feeling profoundly alone. He talked about crying himself to sleep, about feeling like he was performing a character rather than living a life. He talked about his father with a complicated mixture of gratitude and pain that never fully resolved. Michael Jackson's genius was real, and it was built on a foundation that cost him something he spent his entire adult life trying to get back, a childhood he never had. In 1982, Michael Jackson released an album that didn't just top the charts, it rewrote what popular music was capable of. Off the Wall in 1979 had already established Michael as a solo superstar, but Thriller, produced by Quincy Jones, was something else entirely. It became the best-selling album in history, a record it held for decades. 7 of its 9 tracks became top 10 singles. The title track's music video, 14 minutes long with a horror movie director and a full zombie choreography sequence, changed what music videos could be forever. At the 1984 Grammy Awards, Thriller won 8 Grammys in a single night, a record that stood for decades. Michael performed Billie Jean on the Motown 25 television special and debuted the moonwalk to a television audience of 47 million people. The reaction was instantaneous and global. Even Fred Astaire called him to say it was the greatest dancing he had ever seen. Michael Jackson at this moment was not just a pop star. He was a cultural phenomenon on a scale the world had never seen before. He was crossing racial barriers that American music had never fully crossed. He was the first black artist to receive heavy rotation on MTV. His videos were events. His tours were spectacles. He was, by almost any measure, the most famous person on Earth. Thriller wasn't just an album. It was a cultural rupture, a before and after moment in the history of popular music that nobody has come close to matching since. By the late 1980s, Michael Jackson had everything, and was beginning the process of losing himself entirely. He bought a 2,700-acre ranch in California and named it Neverland after the fictional island in Peter Pan where children never grow up. He filled it with a zoo, an amusement park, a movie theater, and a train. He said it was the childhood he never had. He invited children, many of them sick or underprivileged, to come and enjoy it. His appearance was changing dramatically. Multiple plastic surgeries had altered his face almost beyond recognition. His skin had become dramatically lighter. He was becoming more reclusive, more eccentric, more disconnected from ordinary reality. In 1993 came the first accusation that would permanently alter his public image. Jordan Chandler, a 13-year-old boy, alleged that Michael had sexually abused him. Michael denied the accusations absolutely. A criminal investigation was opened. Michael was strip-searched by police. The civil case was settled out of court for a reported $23 million. Michael maintained it was not an admission of guilt, but a business decision to end a distracting lawsuit. The criminal case was dropped when Jordan Chandler refused to testify. The damage to his reputation was profound and permanent. Half the world believed him, half didn't. That division never fully healed. The 1993 accusations marked the moment Michael Jackson stopped being purely a musical icon and became something more complicated, a figure around whom enormous questions hung and never fully left. In 2003, a documentary filmmaker named Martin Bashir spent 8 months following Michael Jackson. What he broadcast changed everything again. Living with Michael Jackson showed Michael holding hands with a teenage boy and saying he saw nothing wrong with sharing his bed with children. The documentary was watched by 38 million people in America alone. Public opinion shifted dramatically. In 2003, Gavin Arvizo accused Michael of sexual abuse. Michael was arrested, photographed, fingerprinted, and charged with multiple counts of child molestation. He appeared at his arraignment in pajama pants. The trial began in 2005. The prosecution's case had significant problems. The accusers had a documented history of making false allegations against other celebrities. Their timeline contradicted known facts about Michael's schedule. Multiple witnesses testified that they had never seen anything inappropriate. On June 13, 2005, Michael Jackson was acquitted on all 14 counts. He walked out of court a free man, but a broken one. He had lost Neverland. He had lost his reputation in large parts of the world. He had spent years and hundreds of millions of dollars on his defense. He left America the day after the verdict and didn't return for 3 years. Michael Jackson was found not guilty by a jury that heard all the evidence. That verdict has never fully settled the public debate, and never will. While the world was focused on the trial, almost nobody noticed that one of the richest men in entertainment was quietly going broke. At his peak, Michael Jackson's net worth was estimated at over $500 million. He owned half of the Sony ATV music publishing catalog, including the Beatles songs, which alone was worth hundreds of millions. But his spending was extraordinary. Neverland cost $5 million a month to maintain. He spent millions on art, antiques, and shopping trips that could total $1 million in a single afternoon. He borrowed heavily, and the interest was crushing. By the mid-2000s, he owed hundreds of millions of dollars. Neverland was nearly foreclosed on. He was living in rented mansions, moving between Las Vegas, Bahrain, Ireland, and back to Las Vegas again. By 2008, he was in serious financial crisis. The solution his advisors proposed was a comeback tour. Michael agreed to 50 dates at the O2 Arena in London. The shows sold out in hours. Michael Jackson's financial collapse was as spectacular as his rise. The same excess that had defined his life as a star was systematically destroying everything he had built. In the spring of 2009, Michael Jackson was rehearsing for the biggest comeback in music history. He was also dying. Rehearsal footage from the This Is It tour shows Michael moving with remarkable grace and precision for a 50-year-old man who hadn't performed in years. He looked thin but engaged. He was clearly excited about the shows. What the cameras didn't show was what was happening off stage. Michael had severe insomnia. He had struggled with sleep for years and had become dependent on increasingly powerful sedatives. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, had been hired at Michael's request to administer propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic, to help him sleep. Every night. Propofol is not a sleeping medication. It is used in operating rooms by anesthesiologists with full monitoring equipment. It is not safe for home use. Dr. Murray was administering it in a bedroom with inadequate monitoring equipment. On June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson stopped breathing. Dr. Murray called 911 after an inexplicable delay. By the time paramedics arrived, Michael was unresponsive. He was taken to UCLA Medical Center and pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. He was 50 years old. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2011 and served 2 years in prison. Michael Jackson didn't die from a drug overdose in the traditional sense. He died because a doctor hired to keep him alive was administering a drug no responsible physician should ever give outside a surgical setting, and doing it every night for weeks. After death, Michael Jackson became even more complicated and even more valuable. His estate earned over $2 billion in the decade after his death. His music returned to the top of the charts worldwide. A Broadway show cemented his cultural legacy. Then, in 2019, the documentary Leaving Neverland featured two men who alleged that Michael had abused them as children. Both had previously defended Michael publicly, including during his trial. Both now gave detailed, emotional accounts of sustained abuse. The documentary reignited a debate that had never fully settled. Radio stations in some countries removed his music. Others refused. His estate disputed the documentary's claims aggressively. The legal battles continue. The question of what Michael Jackson did or did not do to children will likely never be definitively resolved in a court of law. What is not disputed is the scale of his musical achievement, the tragedy of his personal life, and the extraordinary complexity of his legacy. Michael Jackson is simultaneously one of the greatest artists in human history and one of the most troubling figures in it. Both things can be true, and that tension is what makes his story impossible to look away from. A boy from Gary, Indiana, who could dance before he could read properly. The greatest selling album in history. A ranch full of animals and fairground rides, and the ghost of a childhood he never had. 2 trials, financial ruin, a doctor administering surgical anesthetic in a bedroom, and a legacy so complicated that the world still hasn't figured out what to do with it. Michael Jackson didn't just make music, he made history. And like all history, it's messier, sadder, and more complicated than the version we wanted to believe. If you want more stories like this, click the card above for our breakdown of the Catholic Church scandals, animated in Lego. See you there.